We are live and we're back on chapter 3 of Genius Spark. If you haven't gotten a copy of the book, I'm going through each chapter. You can get the book on Amazon, either in Kindle form or hard copy. If you want an autograph version, you can go to my website, get a copy there. And this week, the theme or the chapter title is Breaking the Cycle. For lots of people, just the awareness of, oh, this is what I do, and this is what it feels like, and this is what it looks like, is enough to change a life. I'm going to share some stories where that was the case. I'm going to open with the quote from the movie Inception. This is Cobb. He's one of the main characters, Leo DiCaprio. The seed that we planted in this man's mind may change everything. So my hope is that the seed that we will plant today in terms of discovering who you are at your best and then how to continue to work a little bit every day, those little incremental investments, we call it compounding effect. And I've got some YouTube videos on that compounding effect. This is not a dive in 2-day workshop, come away with that mountaintop experience and then go home and wonder where did it all go. This is just simple little habits daily that make a big difference. Now, part of discovery is changing our awareness. Since Lisa and I moved to the ranch, there's all kinds of things that we never knew were signs and indicators of what was going on. We've got some mesquite trees on the property, and one of the signs is that when the mesquite trees get their first green on them, that's a sign that you're not going to have any more freeze going on. So it may get cold, but it won't get below freezing. Another early sign is the primrose. And the root word for primrose or primus means first. So it's the first plants of spring. And that kind of wakens up the awareness. Before, spring would come, but I wouldn't know the leading signs and what to look for next. I'm going to point us to looking and finding genius in other people. Because if you slow down enough and you observe and you see what somebody naturally does at their best, where they get absorbed, where they get curious, where they get excited or energy. If you're a manager and you begin to notice in a meeting where somebody gets animated, could be positively or negatively, or where somebody has some energy behind this or a point or a question or a process or something they get frustrated with. Those are all internal signals of something that's naturally percolating in that person that's worth playing on. So when managers find what people do naturally above and beyond their normal functional role, and you identify it, name it, and then empower that person to take that role. So for example, in meetings, the project teams come, and a lot of times if it's not that person's area, they might be the mechanical, electrical, plumbing person, or they might be the drywall person. And so if it's not totally pertinent to them, they may be sitting out and just twiddling their thumbs or checking social media. Now, one particular team, it was a hospital project in Florida. I went through the room and said, so what frustrates you about the meetings that you have? And as we identified those, we saw and looked at how they're wired, the Clifton Strengths, and we used that. And I recommend, if you haven't taken the Clifton Strengths Assessment, do. And that's an indicator of how your brain is wired to do what it enjoys most and what comes natural and what you'll be best at. That's just an indicator. So going around looking at people's frustrations, some may be frustrated by the fact that we talk a lot And at the end, there's really no action that we're taking. That person might have achiever or some other get it done kinds of strengths or responsibility, sense of ownership. And they can bring that to the table to make sure before we go, what are we going to do with this? Or another may be sensitive to the fact that certain people monopolize the meeting and other people sit. So if they have includer or developer as some of their strengths, they may look at how to engage more people in the dialogue and get more participation in it. It was a 2-day workshop we were doing. One of the individuals said, and this is a group that comes together for 3 or 4 days, once a month, it's called a big room. It's got all the mapping of the project and the hot issues, and it's a central command center. And he said, when we come together, the food sucks. And I had to agree with him. Eating boxed Kentucky Fried Chicken when it's cold with those mashed potatoes that turn into concrete, not the greatest experience. That day, after we had lunch, it was pretty quick, functional, efficient, and we got back to it. I asked him, and he was the mechanical, electrical, engineering, or plumbing guy. Big guy, you could tell, and I knew by his strengths with positivity and maximizer that he likes to enjoy things and he likes it very particular. A lot of times I find that maximizers can be foodies, fashionistas, art aficionados. Anything that has sensual excellence to it will activate somebody with maximizer. And then the converse is true. If it's mediocre, they're not shy to either give you a facial expression or just say, as he did, the food sucks. So I asked him, I said, what would you propose? He says, well, let me take care of it. He comes in the next day with barbecue from an in the swamp place. Remember, we're in Central Florida that he only knows about. It's his go-to place. And he had this spread, and it was incredible. Everybody was enjoying it. We spent more than the 30 minutes. It was probably close to an hour, 15 minutes that we just enjoyed. And that's part of the goal, is to build relationships and enjoy one another and learn more about the non-business side of who I'm working with. The best part about it was he was off to the side standing with his arms folded with a big grin because people were enjoying his unique genius, the spark that makes him come alive, and it made the whole meeting better. And guess what? He was more engaged and more participative in all of our conversations, where before he was just going through the motions. And a lot of people do that until it comes to my topic, but he was engaged the whole time. Now, in observing what people naturally do best and enjoy most, I've got a new lab experiment going on with our grandson coming down at the ranch. And part of what I've discovered is that I oftentimes don't slow down enough to observe what other people's magic is, what they naturally do best and enjoy most. And my definition for genius is that what comes natural to you but looks like magic to me is genius. One of his favorite areas in the kitchen is in the bottom cabinet are all of the bowls. Some of them are plastic, some of them are metal. And what he loves to do is take all of our wooden spoons and spatulas and our metal whisk and hit and bang on those. I just got mesmerized because what he did, we had 5 different objects to hit with, spoons. He would hit one on the metal thing, listen, and then lay it down flat. Then he grabbed another one, hit it once, and then laid it next to him. Hit it again with a third one, laid it next to him all the way through. And then he organized them. He turned over all the spoons so they were up. So what was I watching? He was fascinated by it. And he was very organized, curious, studying, almost like a scientist would. Test, experiment, try it, but very meticulous. So what that told me is that when I'm with him, things that engage him, that he can play with and fiddle with and just study, he studies. I need to slow down and let that come out. So when you see somebody and you go, huh, wow, or watch their fascination or curiosity, it's likely that they're tapping into their genius. Now, as adults, and we have our strengths, we can begin connecting those spontaneous reactions to how we're wired. What I want to share is a series of stories of people who were stuck, and the discovery of how they were wired completely changed their lives. In chapter 3, I open up with a story, and it's Bob. Now, Bob was working for a federal agency that had lots of engineers. And it's interesting, when I give these workshops, I find that marketing, sales, creatives love spending time with this and love going on the rabbit trails. Managers also really like it, but they want some of the practical tools to manage their teams and get through some of the how do I get more people engaged, being proactive and pro-social, playing well and taking initiative, and then how do I deal with conflict. Leaders, make it short, give me the highlights of it. But people who are engineers or government folks, they go through a lot of training. They get lots of training in different areas. And so for them, it's like, I've been there, done that. What new stuff can you show me? Engineers, skeptical. Show me the proof in this. I had a group early on when I started doing this that were both in the government and engineers, and most of them ex-military. This was a tough crowd. And so I knew the profile and the natural dynamics of the team. And the natural dynamics of the team had a strength at the very top. It's called deliberative, and that's the vigilant risk mitigation strength, and very cautious. Anything new, untried, is considered suspect. That's on a good day. When they're having a good day, it's suspect, and it's prove it to me. We call it the burst your bubble strength. If you come in with an idea, boom, here's why it won't work. Here's all the things that could go wrong. Now, for most, it comes out of a good place. It comes out of exposing the things that could go wrong that you're going to need to address. When it's in kind of a toxic environment, it can be brutal. And then the cousin to that is analytical. Analytical is naturally skeptical. Prove it to me. Show me the data. Make sure it's logical. And those were the two top strengths of this group. So remember, these strengths are energy fields. And in general, seek out areas or opportunities to engage. And that's for a later lesson on how to optimize that or how to keep it from getting in the way. But for this group, they were not a high performing group. They had lots of conflict in the group. So you can guess what I was walking into. As I started out, I had two reactions. The person to the left of me said, are we that broken that we need somebody like you to step in and help us? So my answer was, I'm not sure where this is going to go, but let's see. And I don't know if I'm the fix for you, but if you hang with me a little bit, let's just see where this goes. And then that wasn't enough, but the next person said, we don't believe in any of this fuzzy-wuzzy, horoscopy, kumbaya, psychobabble bullshit. So it set the tone. And again, I took a more, let's wait and see. I get where you're coming from. I understand how this can look and feel and all that. But there was a person in the back right corner. We'll call him Bob, and that's who I use in the book. Bob wasn't having any of this. Arms were folded. He wasn't a healthy individual. He was a big individual. And he folded his arms and slumped in his chair and had his head straight down, would not engage. Even when I walked into space, would not engage. And didn't participate at all. And part of the challenge for me as a strategic person with a goal achiever, trying to accomplish and succeed, and relator, build genuineness and rapport. None of those strengths were being activated. And so that creates stress. I'm not accomplishing what I want. And I could feel that in me, that I really wanted to figure a way to pull this guy in. So we break for lunch, and I go to lunch, and a colleague, one of the other senior partners at the firm, consulting firm I was in, came with me. He's a Jungian clinical psychologist to boot. So we went to lunch together, and of course I had a mission to get Bob to just open up a bit, find out where he was at, get him back in the game so after lunch he would be part of the group. Remember, when you're activating your strengths, it feels good. So I asked Bob, what do you get to do during the week that activates the strengths and you feel a positive energy? He had a one-word answer: nothing. And okay, I shifted back. What do you get to do outside of work that activates, that you feel good? And he said, nothing, just deadpan. Now, my stress level is starting to increase because I'm not sure where this is going, and we've got another 50 minutes of lunch together. I'm struggling a little bit and ask Bob, how long has this been going on? And then it got worse. He said, 25 years. I hate my job. I hate the people I work with. And so you feel this pit in your stomach. You're with somebody who's hurting. His kind of hurt is way beyond my pay scale. I'm a coach. Now, we had a Jungian psychologist there. We could have done that, but that's not what we were there to do. And my question to him was, Bob, play this out for me over the next 5 years. Where is this going to go health-wise, career-wise, happiness-wise? What's the end game if nothing changes? And he just shook his head and dropped and said, I don't know. Fortunately, we were in a very cool part of the state, and it was a Civil War area. And the person I was with was an expert and written several books on the Civil War. So he began to ask Bob about the area and if he's been. So we got through the lunch. On our way back, it was my colleague and I who just walked together. And he said, boy, this guy is clinically depressed. So we go back into the meeting and we go through several aha moments. Several people had big ahas, but Bob didn't react at all. He was non-committal, didn't participate for 4 full days. So I wasn't sure where this was going. But we did have several other people who were in not as bad a situation as Bob, but similar. So let me tell you about Virginia. Now, Virginia was in this group, and she had strengths like empathy and belief and self-assurance. So she was tough. She's single mom, ex-military engineer. And the executive officer, when I said that she had empathy, he said, there ain't no way that this person has empathy. This person is the most corrosive, mean-spirited person on the team. And I go, okay. So we go around the room, and I'm going through some of the strengths people have. And I asked Virginia about empathy. I said, how does that show up for you? And she, again, coarse language, says, I don't have blankety blank empathy. I could see why she would say that. She's thinking that what empathy is soft, touchy-feely. And at its roots, if you read what Gallup says about empathy, it's the instincts to put yourself in someone else's shoes, sense what they're feeling, and be able to verbalize it. Now, it can mean caring. A lot of times it does. It's that care and support because you can put yourself in someone else's shoes. I'm stuck here a little bit and thinking, maybe she doesn't have empathy because she came out of the chute as mean-spirited, questioning, and tough. And that was the general tone of everybody. So I asked her, I said, is there somebody really close to you in your life? And she said, oh, it's my daughter. She goes to Tulane. I said, oh, great. So what's it like when the two of you connect? When she comes home, what's it like? She says, oh, as soon as she walks in the door, I know what her whole semester was like. And I can read her and I'm going, that's empathy. So I paused her as she was saying that. I said, Virginia, do you know what you just said? She comes home and you can read everything that's gone on with her for a month. You know her in a way that not only a mom, but somebody with empathy. That's what empathy is. Empathy is not being soft or touchy-feely. That was a big aha. Then in that same group, we had two individuals that had been working together for 15 years. One was the executive officer. One was one of the managers under there. Now, the executive officer had activator and futuristic, move fast, be a catalyst, visionary. Let's not think of the past. This other person has context that is, let's go back to the past and not reinvent the wheel, but let's look at what's worked. The activator futurist wants to reinvent the wheel. The person with context doesn't. They want to learn from the past and build on the past. And he also had maximizer. I sometimes call maximizer the Braveheart talent because issues and ideas and positions that you take can turn from that into a cause that you're willing to die for. It's a very passionate, good to great, sometimes perfection, non-compromising kind of strength. So they had been at loggerheads for 15 years. Then there was Barry. Now, Barry was interesting, and he has a particular combination of strengths. Two of them are consistency and discipline. That means that this person has a very orderly life. They think ahead, they plan ahead, and they bring order to chaos. And so they try to make things as predictable as possible. I asked him about his morning schedule, and he was precise. I get up at this time, I do this. And everybody was watching with wide eyes going, whoa, that's orderly. And then I asked, so what do you eat for breakfast? Because I knew where this was going. And he says, oh, I eat the same thing every morning. And part of what I was doing is doing these setup questions with people that I knew where it was going and let them fill in the story. And people were having fun watching, whoa, wow, we didn't know that about you, or we did know that about you, now we know why. So I'm going to shift gears and talk about our desire to be our best selves. And every one of these people I talked about have an inner desire to be their best selves, but they were trapped. And instead of being their best selves, they were either going through the motions or feeling very bitter or angry of the circumstances they were in and thinking and projecting that was other people, but not ever realizing or thinking it could be that I'm doing things that aren't natural for me. I'm not tapping into what I naturally do best and enjoy most. So therefore, it's draining my life force out of me, and I don't even realize what's going on. So let's talk about Maslow. In the chapter, I talk about Maslow in a different context than what you may be familiar with. We're all familiar with the pyramid and how we're driven to meet our basic needs and then move into our relational needs, our accomplishment needs for recognition. And then we get to this self-actualization, becoming what you might call your best self. Now, Maslow did not create the pyramid or the hierarchy. That came afterwards because it seemed like a logical progression. But when you read Maslow's work, this drive for self-actualization, and if you think of self-actualization is to be your best self, he clearly wrote that is the core drive and desire that we all have. He said What we can be, we must. And he describes it like a drowning victim trying to get to shore. That must is not like an imperative obligation. It's an internal need. It's like air we breathe or the water we drink. It's that fundamental of a need, so that at every stage of what we call the pyramid or the hierarchy, we have that drive to be the best we can be, to actualize that next level. And I go through this in the book, and I think what we're bringing to it is new insight. It's not different insight. He always described it, but we've had such a bias towards this ladder and this pyramid that I think it takes away what Maslow was truly getting after, and a key switch to help us understand what we're trying to do. There's a learning flywheel, and Maslow talked about that we go through stages of learning. We're in this state called unconscious incompetence. We don't know what we don't know. Then the next level we hit is, oh, now I know what I don't know. It's called conscious incompetence. I know what I don't know. And so that leads us to, if you remember the movie The Matrix with Morpheus and Neo, in that scene where Morpheus is saying, you've had this splinter in your brain you didn't know before. Now you do know. Now you have to make a choice. And the choice is the red pill, blue pill choice. You either take the blue pill and go back into your blissful ignorance and live the life that you were living, or you take the red pill of adventure and unknown and you go down the rabbit hole and see how far it goes. That's the key switch for teachers with kids in school, is how do I get them from unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence, knowing what they don't know, but wanting to take that red pill. And then you go through your learning stage. This is the learning curve. It's frustrating. It's hard to get through, but you get to a point of competency. Now you know what you know. And then the last stage is mastery, called unconscious competence. But the key to the flywheel, and I think this is where the intersection of his learning flywheel and, quote, his pyramid is, that in that learning flywheel, we're always striving to get to that next level of the better actualization of who we are, that next layer of actualization. Think of it as many caterpillar, butterfly stages. And so we're always trying to do that, moving up that ladder to self-mastery. And I believe there's a level beyond that we talk about in the book, going from mastery into virtue. But that's for another time. When we feel that life force going through us, when we're tapping into what we naturally do best and enjoy most, I like to describe it like a mountain stream, clear water heading down unimpeded all the way to the bottom. And it just feels exhilarating. But we've described people who have that life force in them, but it's dammed up for whatever reasons. Or it could even be gotten to the point where it's a dry creek. It's just, there's nothing there flowing anymore. It's so shut down. If you remember from the previous chapter too, that connects with the research that NASA did on trying to find the best and the brightest. And they created an assessment called the Imaginative Index to find who the best and brightest were. And it was the kind of assessment that you can give to kids. In a year or two, Gwydion will be able to take it. He's 2 now. When he gets to be 4 years old, and that's the age range that he was working with, you could ask Gwydion, hey, here's a can. How many different uses of this can you think of? And then they would measure the number of solutions, the practicality of the solutions, and the novelty to see where they rank on the genius range. 98% of kids in that age range test as geniuses. So over time, it gets constrained like a dam being put in place, or it just goes dormant and dry altogether. And that positive energy, when you release it, and when these individuals that I described found that release, it totally changed their lives. Now, one of the challenges that we face is that as I looked at all the tools and the systems out there, and I've been doing this for 25 years, focused wise, I started my career, I got certified in DISC in 1979. So I've been doing these kinds of things for a long time, but here's the challenge with all the systems is you have to learn the system. And those systems are cumbersome, challenging, complex, and it's a $67 billion worldwide industry. All of these tools are great, but then you have to have a business model that monetizes those tools. So that you go through training and workshops and certification and all that stuff. I just heard somebody tell me that they were getting ready to go take certification in one of the tools, and it's $10,000 in a week of your time. Don't do that. Bottom line, what do I look like at my best? You want evidence for that. There are processes and coaching that can walk you through a life journey to find that, but you can get there very quickly by taking one of a number of assessments. And then a process of lifting from that assessment the things that you resonate with the most and boiling it down to a simple, what you might call elevator pitch, short description of who you are at your best. And of course, we do the how you get in your way, and that's for another chapter and another time, but that's what you really want. So what can get you there quickest? And that's where I say, I've got 5 strengths. Do I need to know all the other ones that other people have? Nice to know, not need to know. Now, as a coach and a trainer, of course, you've got to know that stuff. But in general, those get in the way, and those are impediments. Those are hurdles that managers have to face, that if I'm going to be a good manager, how do I manage and learn not just 34 strengths or themes? And it's dynamic. It depends on where it ranks in your 5 and what it's next to as to how it's going to show up. So now you've got 33,600,000 combinations of those. And again, what we're trying to accomplish is a learn by doing kind of approach. So if you know how to create your genius paragraph and your kryptonite, and if you know how to clarify and begin being observant about how it looks and how it feels, and then coming back and refining that. And if you have a simple protocol of reinforcing that paragraph regularly, I do it every day. And if you have a process of reflecting at the end of the day, how did I show up? That's the process of change and growth. It's not acquiring more knowledge. Now, some people have a thirst for more knowledge. I'm one of those. I'm an assessment geek, but in practical experience, having done this now with more than 19,000 people over 25 years, it's keep it simple, and it's the 80-20 principle. In fact, it's less than the 80-20 principle. It's the 20% of the 20% that is the difference maker for you in terms of focus. And again, paragraph of who you are at your best, and then kryptonite, you want to know what somebody else looks like at their best and how their strengths get in their way. And then it's a simple process of how do we build the vocabulary and the dynamics of conversations and the process and the discipline of improving and improving. So at the bottom line, the first step is clarifying your potential, and you can do that with any assessment. I happen to like the Clifton Strengths because it's measuring how your brain is functioning. It's not a style, personality style, or a communication style, or a behavior preference assessment. Those are useful too. But if you know how someone's brain is wired, what they naturally do best and enjoy most, if you then can learn or see what happens under pressure, and then if you have a process of continuing to strengthen and strengthen what you naturally do best and enjoy most, that's the game right there. Now, the next step, once you create that paragraph or that elevator pitch of who you are at your best. Now you need to ground that into where am I on this journey? Where am I in my showing up at my best? And that's a daily habit for me. At the end of the day, I measure, how did I show up? How did I show up at this? And which of my strengths were activated this morning in preparation? Or what strengths are activated in doing this? And where did I get in my way? And at the end of the day, I use a little Kindle Scribe. I used to do it on Apple Notes. And before that, I did it in a journal. So this is my tool. I know there's other tools like this, like Remarkable, but doing that, and again, the reason I do that at the end of the day is that if I open what's called a narrative loop in the morning and reinforce and read my paragraph, and then at the end of the day, if I don't close the loop, it's what I call a sandcastle day. I started with good intentions. I built some momentum and thinking and experience and stuff. I had this happen to me this morning. I had a great idea to include in here as I was waking up in that kind of fertile, creative state of mind. And I thought, oh, I'll remember. Guess what? I did not remember. And that's the problem of not closing the loop, writing it down, and getting it locked in. Your brain needs that for its learning and its continual growth and adaptation. The next step is the performance science part of it. How do you reinforce, rehearse, get feedback, and reflect? And we'll talk about that in another chapter. And then it's the learning flywheel. It's that unconscious incompetence to conscious incompetence. How do I go from not knowing what I don't know to getting probed? And a lot of times it's a situation, a problem that I've never experienced, or my kryptonite showing up. I didn't realize, oh, that's something I have to work on. So what happened to Bob, Victoria, and Barry? We had that workshop. 90 days later, 3 months later, I came back for what was a train the trainer event, going to the next level. And we can train internally a lot easier than what I was doing 15 years ago. It's a pretty fast on-ramp. If you want to get certified as either an internal coach or a professional coach. And by the way, we do have a weekly forum that's free. We have it for our existing coaches, but anybody who's interested in seeing what is this all about, tangent and promotion. Sorry about that. So I show up at the workshop and Bob is there and he's smiling, shakes my hand and says, Rex, it's great to have you here. And I'm thinking, whoa, what's going on? This is not what I expect. Your mind plays tricks on you. And I'm thinking, okay, government worker, clinical depression. Now he's happy. Maybe my life is in jeopardy or something like that. But that wasn't the case. As we were starting off, Bob said, Rex, would you mind if I take a moment? I've got something I need to tell the group. Now, I hope I can get through this because 15 years later, it's still emotional to think about what just happened. He gets up in front of the group in tears and he tells the group that he's sorry for being an SOB for so many years. He never understood why. And he said, I love you guys. This is the best group I've ever worked with. You can imagine what happened in the room of pretty tough people. There were people who couldn't keep their composure. I couldn't keep my composure. So I said, let's take a break. So I went up to the executive officer and I said, what just happened here? He said, I don't know what you guys talked about at lunch, the first day of the last workshop, but he came to me and asked, can I have dinner with you tonight? I've got something I need to talk about. He shared why he was struggling so much. And I'll shorten it up because basically this individual, Bob, is wired to be creative and a loner genius. That's what he does best and he enjoys. But his job was to manage young fresh out of high school, union members, and the immaturity, the union games. He didn't have any of the strengths that could help him. For 25 years, he's going to work every day dreading it. Now, the executive officer who had also gone through the training recognized, and it dawned on him immediately, and they put him in a new role on the future of this agency, the future technology of the agency. So 90 days later, he's not only happy, but he's not clinically depressed anymore. And he found an outside hobby. And it's an amazing story. And I've got another colleague who keeps track of him, and he says he's doing great. So what happened to Victoria? This was so impactful for Victoria that she wanted to become the champion of the strengths for the team. She became the champion. Now, the executive officer wanted her off the team. That was the goal. But the team so transformed with her passion and her diving in that they went from worst in the FAA in terms of how they performed into one of the top. And it totally opened the door for us to go through and work with thousands of people in that organization. The two with Activator and Futuristic and Context and Maximizer, going through, again, the discovery and the aha. The person with Context said, I'm not a pain in the ass. I've got context. And it was funny. Everybody just laughed out loud. And the two of them had a meal together and mended 15 years of tension and conflict. And then the guy who ate the same breakfast every morning, on the last day, he came in smiling because he's pretty straightforward and non-expressive. And he was smiling, and people asked, so what are you smiling about? He said, I ate a different breakfast this morning. So he recognized that, hey, this is a great strength that I have, and it helps me do what I do well, but I can get in a rut. So I'd like to close with a quote from the book from a civil rights champion, Howard Thurman. Do not ask yourself what the world needs. Ask yourself what makes you come alive, because what the world needs is people who have come to life. This is not difficult. It's simple to do. Any assessment you want, and the book will take you through any assessment. It's not assuming we're using the Clifton Strengths. Our app uses the Clifton Strengths to help you create this paragraph. But begin to craft a picture of what you naturally do best and enjoy most. And then follow the instructions about how to reinforce it. Imagine the day, what it would look like in different meetings like I did this morning. What's this going to look like at its best? Then get feedback from others. And we have ways that you can do that. So stay tuned, keep coming, and I'll walk you through all of that. And then reflect. That's the learning flywheel for us. Reinforce, rehearse, feedback, reflect. So thank you for sticking with us on this. This is a new adventure for us. This is chapter 3. Next will be chapter 4. And then in the meantime, let us know if there's any way we can help you. And remember that when you're engaged in being the best version of yourself, there's an essence of you that's wonderfully weird. And so I like to say, aspire to be wonderfully weird. Take care.